Hello, I'm Connor Lifson, and this is TABLEWORK, a TAPS podcast series where we interview the artists and theater makers behind our productions on what it takes to get their productions from the page to the stage. This episode features Raissa Simpson, a lecturer of dance and dance studies in TAPS. Join us as she talks about her upcoming piece called Ode to Intimacy, which is part of Spring Rise Up, a dance sensorium on the TAPS main stage. It opens May 22nd in the Elam Theater. Hi, Raissa. I am delighted to talk to you about your upcoming piece, and thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Can you start us off by just telling us a little about Ode to Intimacy?
Yes, Ode to Intimacy. And just to tell you a little bit about it, logistically, it's a piece, and I'm working with an 8-member cast. We are developing the work together. It's a very collaborative process. And I was influenced by poems by Nikki Giovanni and other poets who wrote about sort of the antithesis of love. So, Ode to Intimacy for me is anything but love. It's about relationships and power. And mixed into that, I would say, would be some vintage love songs that pop artists have created in terms of complicated relationships that often arise from looking for love. So that's just, a little bit about the piece and what we're working on.
Okay, that's beautiful. So you mentioned that these poems by Nikki Giovanni were influential for you in the creation of the piece. Was there a moment when you knew that this had to be a dance piece, or like when did it happen for you that you decided to take this as a central point of inspiration?
Right. I mean, I think that the poems are almost like the language that we're trying to create physiologically. So the poems felt very abstract to me, and that's when I knew I really wanted to make an abstract dance piece that really wasn't too didactic in nature and, really had a lot of, I would say, gestural movement. We're using our limbs as a form of expression as well. And I think that's when I knew that that was the direction I really wanted to go in.
Oh, that's so great. The I'm curious about you mentioned it's a collaborative process of you coming up with this piece with your ensemble, um, and this exciting process of translation or adaptation from words into abstraction. Um, and I'm curious if you could just walk us through your process a little bit. Like how do you transform an idea into a full on dance piece? When does like exploration turn into refining into a specific score? um, and like when do you know when to set something that you've discovered in rehearsal? I know it's like a huge question, so if you want to just focus on one part of the process, feel free.
Well, I think part of creating the work is just a desire to speak to a cast and have them ask questions. I think early on in my training at a conservatory, we would learn pieces from video, and it would be pieces that were set on us as students. So we never got to ask the choreographer questions or come into the piece with a level of curiosity like, what is this about? Why am I dancing about this? So in this process, I'm kind of excited that, I can start this process in particular with just dialogue and just talking about relationships and love and where we are with it. And, just honoring that this is kind of like an intergenerational conversation, that I have had more experience with relationships than the group that I'm talking to. So part of that was leaning into where everybody in the cast is now with relationships, and also diving into the lyrics of the songs, and also looking at why this particular song was written. So the songs are more from Sisters of Mercy, which is kind of like a golf song and, really kind of fun and deep. It's about, just wanting more than just being with one person. And I think when it was written, it was kind of revolutionary in that sense, that Usually we think of the traditional relationship as finding that one person, um, and that is also like looking at how love has evolved from the past till now. And then the second song is Time After Time, which is just about a mishap in communication and moving at a rate that's too fast for somebody else in a relationship. Like you're just not syncing up. And we have Billie Jean, which is a huge undertaking because everybody thinks that they know exactly what this song is about. It's a Michael Jackson song. And how do we take this epic piece of work and make it into a dance? So we're looking at love as obsession and power and who gets to decide, um, you know, what the relationship will look like, how it will shape. Then after that, we have the breakup song, Nothing Compares to You by Prince, which also gained popularity from Sinead O'Connor at one point. And really looking at that song and realizing that the breakup was actually caused by Prince. And, he's kind of lamenting about this relationship that ended, but he started it. He's the one that messed up. Um, And then our last song is What's Up, which isn't necessarily a love song, but it's just looking at systems and patterns and why, as a society, we work and live under a certain code. So that's what we're looking at in our process. And movement, materials, and language were developed last quarter so that this quarter we can just shape them and look at, choreographic devices like time, spreading things out or doing something faster or slower and looking at space, creating formations and groupings and solos. So I think that's sort of a long winded way to answer a question about process, but the process is so responsive. I think it's responsive to the fact that, again, a lot of the people in the cast, a lot of these songs predate them. And a lot of them actually predate me in a certain way, and that I was aware of them, but it wasn't really like part of my generational upbringing. Um, I think within it, we have come to the conclusion that everybody knew who Michael Jackson was, but everyone else, I mean, it was kind of like, yeah, I've kind of heard that, or you played that in class once. So I think that the process is just about being responsive and looking at who knows what, who doesn't know what, and then finding how we can build pieces together on what we commonly have experienced.
Oh, it's so exciting to hear, and what an incredible score for your piece with all of these songs. I'm always curious about the moments in rehearsal of moving from talking to or transitioning from talking to moving. And I'm wondering, like, when you're having these kind of open-ended conversations about these works, does it flow naturally from conversation into getting up and move, or do you clearly kind of delineate we're talking now and now we're dancing?
No, it's a lot messier. It's a lot messier. A lot of obstacles come up. You'll find that dancers are looking for something bodily and corporal to happen, and certain words may spark inspiration, but then you know when to just kind of be quiet as a choreographer. I remember um, growing up, after a while, my teachers would never say anything about our plie combination, which is like, the baseline basic step to dance is bending your knees and just doing that and not saying anything. And saying the reason why I'm not saying anything is because you just at this point need the time and the space to not be told what to do and how to do it, but to allow yourself the freedom to explore how your body is moving and how it responds to the music. So, a lot of, I think, the process is me just sort of leaning back and trusting the performer and then allowing for them to, produce what they kind of know is the theme and allowing for them to arrive at how they're going to execute a particular phrase more in a sense of like not just building their own confidence, but just taking away from, okay, I have to explain this to you now. You know, like I just have to like talk to you and explain again what this is about. But I think that sort of transference from language to movement happens from the repetition of doing something, and just the feeling of when you get it right is the feeling that you just want to remember so that you can consistently do it the same each time.
Mm. Okay, that makes a ton of sense. So we're moving, or you're moving now. You're approaching the time where tech is starting to become a thing in your process, maybe in a month or so. But I'm curious, are there any technical or design elements that you're particularly excited about thinking towards the eventual full production of this?
Definitely. Some things we have seen and some things we haven't seen. Some things are there and some things are yet to come. So, what is there? There's a step unit. There are these stairs that look like a wedding cake almost. In fact, I think, our set designer Nina called it a wedding cake, and I kind of like, clutched my pearls a little bit. I was like, "Oh, it is. Oh my goodness." And this is the part where the design starts to influence what is seen and how the audience is going to relate to the piece, because it's changing and dividing up the space a little bit. It's creating levels where people can be up high or sitting on this piece. It becomes a dancer in, I think, the overall collaboration that we're creating. I remember my dance company, we always had to name our sets, like Adele or Beyonce. We always had to give them diva names. So I think that sort of like this, I don't know, personification, anthropomorphizing. I'm laughing because I'm just like getting into critical theory words. But just like we're like you are something that we have to deal with, and instead of just trying to like make you do the choreography, we're going to have to actually adapt to you not wanting to budge because you are there and you're a structure. But we have to look at you like you're one of us.
I so love the way you talk about this kind of particular phenomenon in rehearsal. I remember hearing about a previous project you did with drones in dance, and the way you spoke about the drones in the room were like they were there were additional performers in your piece, and it's just very exciting to me because I work with puppets a lot, and it feels like a similar kind of deal where it's a material object that's not a human being, but you kind of have to listen to it and ask it what it wants to do, and be responsive to the materials. Um, the next question I was going to ask kind of dovetails nicely here about surprise, something about being responsive to materials or even just being responsive to the collaborators you're working with. Could you tell us about a particular moment or even just an atmosphere of surprise that you've experienced in rehearsal for this piece?
Yeah, I mean, I call this process frontier dance making because I think we're starting something new, at least for me as a choreographer. This is something that I normally would not do in my professional world. And that's what I love about it, is that I can even just challenge myself as a choreographer. So, one surprise is working with motion capture. And I myself have worked with motion capture before. However, this is being done by a student, by Cyan, who's a PhD student. And just watching um, the level of discovery that's taking place, and how also to having, the dancers and students all sort of like see how technology is capturing the way that they move and modifying it and almost creating an essence of themselves on screen. I think that it's, I don't know if you could call it surprise, but it definitely has, I like to frame it more as like serendipity. The serendipitous nature that we are not just dancing, but we're also creating this environment, this atmosphere, so that we can sort of like transport the viewer into this world for 20 minutes or so, and they can just enjoy the what is going to happen. This isn't the normal, very refined piece of choreography that I'm used to seeing, where I know what may potentially happen, or it's not like a flock of birds where you can see what they're doing. There's going to be a lot going on, and maybe you will capture, one or two things, but if you go back and see the piece again, then you might see something else completely, totally different. So I think that it leaves it up to the viewer as to what they want to watch.
Well, that's exactly the kind of performance that I like to see. Is the kind where I'm asked to be active when I'm watching. So, if I'm understanding right, is the motion capture is going to involve some uh, like live processing projections? Is that how that's working in the piece?
It is, yeah. So we have a wonderful media designer named Sarah, and then Cyan will be adding that layer on top of that design. So we're using a camera that then captures the movement and possibly even sensors for sound. Um, we're all sort of just playing around with this and, hoping that it actually shows up and decides to work day one, because working with technology, unlike working with dancers, you just don't know if it wants to go to work that day. So we're going to, ultimately see what we can produce, but that's the gist of it. The camera is picking up the movement and going to the software, and then the software is making those sort of expressions and modifying um, how the bodies are seen on that live projection.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, that's it's incredibly thrilling for me to hear. I guess the last question I have for you is just, and you've already spoken on this a little bit, but I don't know if you want to add to, I guess all in all, like what I think a common question is like what do you want the audience to take away from this piece? And one of the things I loved about what you've been saying is that a lot of that's up to the viewer, which is exciting. But I guess the question I'll instead ask is what kind of experience are you hoping to create for the audience, or what kind of world are you hoping to create for us to walk into?
Well, you've been warned. It's not about love. So you'll see different levels of intimacy and longing. You'll see hunger. You'll see a lot of self deprecation in this. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think I have really thought about what should come of this. But if anything, um, my hope is that the audience can start to see a mirror of society, and perhaps from there continue to evolve definitions of love.
Mm, that's so beautiful. Well, Raisa, thank you so much. I am so excited to see Ode to Intimacy, which is part of Spring Rise Up, a Dance Sensorium, which is opening on May 22nd in the Elam Theater. More details are listed in the podcast description for anyone if you'd like to grab a ticket. Thank you so much, Raisa, for talking with me today, and I can't wait to see your work in a few weeks.
Awesome. Hey, I never get to talk. I'm always dancing, so anytime.